Sometimes I have the weirdest questions pop up into my mind. For example, what happens if Midoriya accidentally uses One for All during a fart? Like, seriously, I think I found the way to beat All for One for good.
Taco Bell Smash!
With the next season of the My Hero Academia series scheduled for release this fall, a lot of new plotlines are going to be revealed for us, especially about One for All. So while we're at it, let's talk about everything you need to know about the most important quirk in the My Hero Academia series. Let me do my impression. The first person cultivates the power, and then passes it on to another. The next refines it and passes it on again. In this way, those crying out to be saved, and those with brave and true hearts, link to form a crystalline network of power. In order to explain One for All, we first need to go way back into the past and look into the story of a man that was literally named after his quirk, All for One. A few decades ago, All for One went around gathering quirks from other people so that he could use his supreme power to rule the world. He also gave his followers quirks so that they'd be in debt to him, acting like a true mafia boss. Nobody dared go against him. He was Japan's most evil and villainous ruler ever, and he had thousands of followers. But he also had a brother. His younger brother was fragile, weak, and didn't seem to have any quirk. But he had a strong sense of right and wrong and was hurt by how his brother behaved. He tried to go against him, but with no success. So All for One locked his brother into prison to try to break his spirit. Maybe out of a sense of love, or cynically trying to make him submit to his will, All for One gave his brother a stockpiling quirk which stores power. But it turns out that the brother already had a quirk that made it possible for him to pass down his own quirk to others, thus making a useless quirk a useful one. When the two powers worked together, they became known as One for All. Over the years, many powerful people, like All Might, have used this quirk. But Izuku Midoriya is the one who brought out its true power by being able not only to use its stockpiling abilities, but also the previous user's quirks. One for All is a powerful quirk. It can store a lot of power that can be used to improve one's physical abilities. Not only can it make you stronger, but it can make you more durable, agile, and fast. The user's appearance can also be changed by the quirk. When Izuku uses his quirk, his body glows, and lines that look like energy veins show up on his body. The weakness of this power is that it takes time for the new user's body to get used to it after it's passed on. And due to the quirk singularity, it becomes stronger and stronger with each generation. This is probably why Izuku broke his entire body when he first tried to use it. Also, when it's passed on, the previous user will only have the leftovers of One for All. This can be seen when All Might couldn't keep his muscular form after giving the quirk to Midoriya, and he was losing his time with the quirk with every use. Next is the dark truth behind OFA's previous users. One for All's overwhelming power has only gotten bigger since the first user. All Might worked on the quirk for 40 years, which was twice as long as anyone else, making it truly his own. Because of this, it's now too much for even a quirkless person to use safely. But because of this disturbing fact, if Izuku gives One for All to someone with a quirk, that person would probably die in a very short period of time, which is really not worth it. Unless they had All Might's body, like I do. All Might reveals some of the darker truths about the power, and explains that the people who held it before Izuku weren't exactly chosen to be the next ones. In fact, the power was just given to someone nearby as part of the never-ending fight to keep the power of One for All from falling into the hands of All for One. This was just to keep cultivating it for the future. All Might also reveals that All for One was so focused on finding One for All that he would kill anyone who seemed strong. The previous users weren't chosen as successors because of how strong they were. Instead, each of them was someone who could be trusted to keep the power for as long as they possibly could, so they could cultivate it in the hopes that someone in the future could use it to defeat All for One. Because of the quirk singularity, Izuku is probably the last wielder of One for All, and it's his responsibility to permanently end All for One's reign of terror. He can't count on his successor to take care of his problems, like Hikage Shinomori, Nana Shimura, and All Might did. Failure is not an option. If All for One and his successor, Tomura Shigaraki, are not permanently stopped in time, the world will lose its best chance to stop the rise of evil. Now let's go back to the origin of the quirk. The first user was Yoichi Shigaraki, the younger brother of All For One. Like we said before, AFO gave his younger brother a stockpile quirk against his will when he was at the top of his game. But Yoichi had the quirk that no one knew about. The unnamed quirk let him give his quirk to someone else by exchanging DNA. One For All was born when his stockpile quirk and this unnamed transfer quirk joined together. Then, Yoichi was held hostage by his brother until the second user of One For All saved him. Horikoshi hasn't told us much about the second and third users of One For All so far, other than how they look. They were in charge of the group that rebelled against AFO when he was at his strongest, and they freed Yoichi from prison. Yoichi's relationship with the second user of One For All was very good. So let's now talk about the users of One For All, shall we? The second and third users. After the silhouette of the second user was shown, many people thought that he might be Bakugo as an adult who had somehow traveled back in time. When the faces of the users were shown, many fans thought that this theory was finally shot down, although some fans still believe Bakugo and the second user had some form of connection. The third user had the quirk Fajin, which lets the user store kinetic energy by repeating a movement and then releasing it in a burst of speed and strength. No one yet knows what the second user's original quirk was, but some speculate it's some kind of projectile quirk. I think that might be true as well. The fourth user was Hikage Shinomori. Hikage Shinomori had a power called Danger Sense, which let him know when there was danger or bad intent nearby. Basically like Spider-Man, huh? He lived during AFO's time of chaos, and at age 22, the third user gave him One For All and the mission to defeat AFO. However, Hikage went into seclusion when he realized he couldn't complete the mission, so he worked on One For All to make it stronger for future generations. At age 40 though, his body began to break down quickly, so he had to give One For All to Daigoro. Unfortunately, the damage was done and he died young. The fifth user was Daigoro Banjo. Daigoro Banjo was the real name of the pro hero Lariat. He had the quirk Black Whip, which was the first quirk that Deku unlocked. It makes his wrist shoot out black energy tendrils. Hikage was kind of like a teacher to Daigoro, and we see it in their interactions in the Vestige world. He tried to fight AFO but lost. But because of his strong will, AFO didn't take One For All from him. As he was stuck under some rubble, he reached out a hurt hand to N, who probably took some of his blood Deku and Bakugo second movie style in order to get the power. The sixth user was N. N was Daigoro's junior colleague, and not much is known about his personal life. He had the quirk Smokescreen, which lets him, well, make smoke. AFO went after and killed N, but his strong will kept AFO from taking One For All again. Before he died, he gave Nana Shimura some of his hair to pass it down to her. Before Izuku Midoriya got it, it looks like N was the youngest person to hold One For All. The seventh user was Nana Shimura. Nana Shimura was a professional hero with the quirk Float, which let her fly and move through the air. Nana had a strange dream after she got One For All. We now know that this was a Vestige dream. Nana was the only holder of One For All who's a woman, and also the only one who had a family she had to leave behind to protect. She died in the battle against All For One after entrusting One For All to All Might. The eighth user is Toshinori Yagi. Toshinori Yagi, also known as the pro hero All Might, is the user who's had One For All the longest. He had it for 40 years, which is because he didn't have a quirk. Nana Shimura gave One For All to Toshinori after he told her about his dream to be a symbol of peace. Toshinori left Japan to train after AFO killed Nana. He finally faced AFO a few years after he got back, becoming the first One For All user to beat him. But because he got hurt so badly, with his stomach and parts of his breathing system damaged in the battle, he decided to look for a successor, which leaves us with Izuku Midoriya. The ninth user of One For All is Izuku Midoriya. Izuku was born without a quirk just like Toshinori, and he got One For All the same way. Midoriya can also access all of the quirks of the people who used it before him, and he often dreams about meeting the vestiges of those people. What makes him special, though, is the fact that he can use the other user's quirk in a much stronger version, because One For All mixed with them and made them stronger than they were before. Now let's do an experiment. Let's see how you can wield One For All. The most important thing you need to be able to use One For All is a strong body. Since One For All brings together the power of so many people, the person who uses it needs to have a strong body in mind. If the user doesn't have a strong body, they'll burst because the strain would be too much for the body to handle. As One for All is the ultimate power that was made to end evil, the person who uses it must have a very kind heart, a strong sense of justice, and the courage to handle every situation with a smile. If someone like Midoriya, for example, uses too much, or his body hasn't fully adapted to it yet, the power can hurt him pretty badly. So, the user who hasn't adapted to it yet has to change slowly and only use a small amount of the power until they can use 100% later. So now, Midoriya is about to face AFO and Shigaraki in the final war of the manga. In order to win, he'll have to master all of the quirks that One for All gives him. Personally, I'm really excited to see Deku use all of the quirks of the previous users and 100% of One for All without any damage on his body. Another thing that would be interesting to see is the combination of One for All at 100% with Fajin. Why, you ask? Because we know that 45% of One for All plus Fajin produces pseudo 100. So if you combine 100% of One for All with Fajin, it'll probably make each shot from Deku like 150% or even higher, depending on how the scale of power goes. And of course, let's not forget the second user's quirk, which is supposed to be a last resort quirk because of how strong it is. The last hope for a better world. In the world of My Hero Academia, more than 80% of people are born with quirks. Also, the percentage won't stop going up for a while. At some point, everyone would be able to use quirks. If this happens before AFO is defeated for good, there's a good chance that the bad guy will be able to make the world do what he wants. Also, OFA only works best with people who are born without a quirk. Izuku Midoriya was, which is why he could handle it better. But in the future, there might not be any. Also, the first person who used it said it's very unlikely that Deku will meet another person without a quirk who needs such power. Finding someone like that is almost impossible. All Might and Deku ran into each other by accident, but it won't happen again and again, especially when quirks become more complex and more common. Because of this, it's pretty much game over for Heroes if he can't beat AFO this time. My Hero Academia is revealing new secrets and making room for the current story arc to grow. Deku has been given responsibilities and burdens that are as big as the universe, but he's still working to make all of them come true. I do like to think that All Might did the right thing when he chose Deku to be his successor. So, unlike All Might and Izuku, who had been able to practice their powers and work with their masters, the previous users were stuck in such a brutal fight that giving the power to someone they could trust was the last thing they could do with their lives. But we'll be seeing more about this in the next season. So, what did you think about this reveal of One for All's past? Let us know all your thoughts about it in the comment section down below. That's all for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like and subscribe, and hit that bell icon for just a cherry on top.